Hi, my name is Lindsay Angle, and this is my informative speech. Ignoring your gut feeling will often result in hard lessons learned. The split decisions that you make on a daily basis can change your life. My son's life was changed with a split decision. In these moments, you can either learn from the consequences or repeat them in the future. My son Zane was born healthy in every way possible. He was always smiling and did all the correct things you could do being a newborn. He was 2 months old. I did notice that he didn't smile as much with my husband as he did me, but I just kind of figured that it was a mother-son bond, that maybe he knew me more than he knew my husband. After all, mothers are known to be the nurturing type, so I went along with it. Well, it was getting time for his 2 month shot, so I took him in to go get his 2 month shots, and I gave him Tylenol as directed to prevent him having fever. I went to work the next day. I left my son with my husband to watch him for the day. And I worried all day long, hoping that he would give him the medicine he needed and, kept an eye on his fever and that kind of thing. Well, I came home after work, and my husband said, he hasn't been right all day. And I immediately noticed that my son wasn't acting quite like he had whenever I had left. He was more sluggish, didn't really want to eat, suck, play, acknowledge me as his mom. So I immediately called the doctor's office. They told me that it's normal for babies to be sluggish after their 2 month shots. Not to worry about it, just try to encourage him to eat. So I did. I encouraged him to eat, and after him crying in pain and throwing up, not getting any relief, I took him to the emergency room. We got to the emergency room, and they informed us that he had colic, and that the reason that he began to be more fixated towards the left. Not so much, but just a little bit. He said, well, he has colic, and the reason that he's fixated is just because he's so tired. So we left there, got him some Pedialyte to try to replenish him, and then we waited a few hours to see if things would get better. Well, it didn't. So we went back to the ER. This time, Zane, my son, was completely fixated towards the left. He could not fixate his eyes to the right. He looked lifeless. He wouldn't breathe hardly, shallow breathing, and he hasn't eaten. And he just looked completely lifeless. And I just kept thinking, oh my goodness, was it the shots maybe that did this to him? What happened? It looked as if he had a stroke. So we got called back to the ER, and they decided to run a CT scan on his brain. We went back there, and while they sent out the order to the CT scan, my husband confessed to me. He said, well, if something pops up, I accidentally bumped his head on the door frame. At that moment, I was so upset, but I couldn't let it show because my son needed me at that time, and I couldn't worry about being mad at my husband at the time. I had to just focus on my son. It was in the here and now. The test came back and shown that Zane was bleeding, having some massive bleeding on the brain, and that he needed to be taken to Children's. They informed us that he would not be able to survive on the ambulance, so that we'd have to get airlifted. So we were airlifted to Children's Hospital immediately. When we arrived, they'd take him straight on back to intensive care. And then all of a sudden, they informed me that, if your son lives, which is only a 10% chance if he lives, and if we don't get the right story, we're going to take him away from you. I was completely shocked. I knew I had no reason to think that my husband was lying to me about anything. I know it was a bad timing for him to just say all of a sudden bring me this to my attention, but I knew he wouldn't have hurt him, or so I thought. So finally, everything came out and about, and I just kept racking my brain about how 2 days before everything was fine, so perfect. He was just a perfect 2-month-old baby. And then I look over at him, and he's in his baby bed with IVs and feeding tubes and breathing machines, and just looks completely lifeless. I'm lost at this point. I don't know what went wrong, what happened. 2 days after the incident, my husband confessed to me that he shook our son. Immediately, I was overfilled with emotions. Brad was put to jail. He served, 2 years in jail. I immediately filed for divorce. That moment, my life had changed. When you're married and you have kids and a family, that's your life. And without them, it just doesn't seem right. And at that moment, when he confessed, I lost a husband and I lost a son that I once knew, and I knew life would be different. Now, Zane is 4 years old, and he's happy. But then when everything happened, the ending result was his whole his whole left side of his brain is completely dead. He had broken ribs on his right. All of his right ribs were broken. His left femur was fractured. He had vitreous and retinal hemorrhages in both eyes. The doctors told us that he would never be able to walk or talk. He would never know my voice anymore. And now Zane is 4 years old, and he's happy as can be. And he's walking, and he's getting there on the talking part. We don't quite understand him just yet, but we're getting there. And he's just a living miracle. We see God's miracle in him every day. God chooses sometimes to heal and sometimes not to heal in hopes to be able to have a miraculous testimony for others. My decision to leave work that day will always haunt me, just wondering what I could have done different. But in every decision, you cannot regret the choices you make, or you'll be haunted by them for the rest of your life. Zane is happy, he's healthy, he'll never have to know everything that happened to him. He'll never have to see his father who did that to him. In the end, I learned that, I should have paid a little bit more attention as far as my son's actions go, how he felt towards my husband. He cried, he didn't act comfortable around him, acted a little different, but I just assumed that it was just being a mother and a son bond, I guess. And I could have lived the rest of my life in fear and danger of men, not wanting to let my guard down ever and just dwell in the past. But I, chose to pick up what little life I had and move forward. We sometimes can't control what we're faced with, but we can control how we handle during and after the situation. Just when a caterpillar thinks its life is over, it transforms into a beautiful butterfly. Even though I thought my life had ended, in reality it had just begun. Thank you.